Quick disclaimer, this is an AI voice, which is not going to be perfect. There is a transcript in the description as well as subtitles for you to read along with. There are many ways democracy can work and factors that can affect democracy. There are also many ways people can participate in politics and factors that affect their participation. Democracy is power exercised by mass of the people. There are two types of democracy, which are direct democracy and representative democracy. Direct democracy is where citizens speak and vote on all issues with the majority view becoming law. The advantages of direct democracy are that everyone in society participates and people directly make decisions in their interest. As well as this, all citizens' voices are heard and it is the purest form of democracy. However, a disadvantage of direct democracy is that it is impractical as it requires all citizens to be involved in decision-making on a daily basis. As well as this, people may not want to make decisions on a daily basis and they will be likely to vote in their own interest and not in the interest of society. In addition, minority voices will not be heard, which will result in tyranny of the majority. An example of a direct democracy is the Athenian democracy, where citizens would meet regularly and vote on a decision, with the majority vote being final. Representative democracy is where citizens elect a representative to make decisions on their behalf. The features of representative democracy are that the election of representatives should be regular, competitive, and secret, and carried out without force and with universal adult suffrage. As well as this, civil liberties must be protected and elections must have multiple political parties running. In addition, there should be constitutional checks to prevent a concentration of government power, and there should be an independent judiciary. The advantages of representative democracy are that professional politicians make complex decisions and the minority views are considered and upheld. As well as this, elected politicians are held to account by the people and it is the most practical form of democracy. However, the disadvantages of representative democracy are that citizens are disengaged from politics and politicians may lack independence as they are part of a party. As well as this, politicians may avoid being held accountable and they are open to corruption and self-interest. The UK is a representative democracy where the citizens elect a representative to sit in Parliament and make decisions on their behalf. The UK is also a pluralist democracy where the government makes decisions based on conflicting ideas and arguments. One similarity between direct and representative democracy is that citizens participate in both and they both have legitimacy, which is the rightful use of power based on rules and agreements. As well as this, both uphold the rule of law and protect individual rights and freedoms. However, the difference between direct and representative democracy is that in the decision-making process, citizens directly contribute to the decisions in direct democracy, whereas in representative democracy, citizens elect representatives to make decisions on their behalf. Another difference is that direct democracy is more suitable for smaller populations and simpler decisions, whereas representative democracy is more suitable for larger populations and more complex decisions. As well as this, direct democracy is a slower system than representative democracy, as everyone in nation must be involved in the decision, whereas representative democracy is much faster as decisions only require the elected representatives. In the UK, there is a lack of involvement in politics by the public, which is known as a participation crisis. This is shown in the falling voting turnout in general elections since 1979, where it was 76% in 1976 and 59% in 2001. As well as this, a party membership is falling and the public are less trusting of politicians. This has led to a democratic deficit, which is where decisions are being made by people who lack legitimacy. Because of this, it is debated whether to make reforms to the current system of democracy in the UK. One possible reform is to make voting compulsory, which would make representatives more legitimate, but would violate individuals' freedom not to vote. Another possible reform is to lower the voting age from 18 to 16, which would bring in more younger voters, but they are less likely to vote. Another possible reform is to use a democracy where citizens vote using the internet, which would make voting more accessible as citizens do not have to leave their homes, but there is risk of hacking which could make the result less accurate and would undermine the legitimacy of elections. Suffrage is the right to vote in public elections, with the franchise being all the people with this right. There have been many key milestones in extending the franchise. The Great Reform Act 1832 granted suffrage to men who were shopkeepers, farmers, and who paid £10 in rent per annum. The Second Reform Act 1867 doubled the electorate to 2 million, but women, the propertyless, and those with cheap properties were excluded. The Ballot Act 1872 introduced the secret ballot, which meant that votes cannot be bought by corrupt candidates, and voters can make up their own minds. The Third Reform Act 1884 extended the franchise to most working men, so now 60% of adults can vote. The Representation of the People Act 1918 allowed most adult men to vote, as well as women who are married, own a property, or are a graduate. The Representation of the People Act Equal Franchise Act 1928 allowed all adults over the age of 21 to vote, including women. The Representation of the People Act 1948 established the principle of one person, one vote, as some people was able to vote more than once in the same election, which was based on property ownership, university membership, and business ownership. The Representation of the People Act 1969 reduced the voting age from 21 to 18. The Scottish Elections Reduction of Voting Age Act 2016 allowed 17-year-olds to vote in Scottish elections, but not in UK general elections. The Send an Election Wales Act 2020 lowered the voting age to 16 for Welsh elections, but not UK general elections. The lack of change in women's right to vote led to the creation of the suffragists. The suffragists were a national organisation of committees that attempted to work with the government. They also had membership open to everyone and operated democratically using peaceful protest methods. Due to the lack of success of the suffragists, the suffragettes were formed, who were a group of 20th century campaigners that advocated for the enfranchisement of women and women's rights by lobbying Parliament and using civil disobedience. The suffragettes were London-centred, only allowing women to be members. They were run by Pankhurst and tried to intimidate the government by using violent and illegal methods. A recent movement to extend the franchise is to grant 16 to 17-year-olds the right to vote. One reason for this is that young people are better politically informed, which is better enabled by social media. As well as this, the turnout for 18 to 24-year-olds is typically very low, so allowing 16 to 17-year-olds to vote may cause more people to vote and be politically engaged. In addition, 16 to 17-year-olds can already serve in the army, get married, and pay tax, but they are not allowed to vote. Another reason for giving suffrage to 16 to 17-year-olds is that the radicalism of the young may balance the extreme conservatism of the older citizens. However, one reason against this is that 16 to 17-year-olds may be too young to make a rational judgment on the issue, and the issue may be too complex for them to understand. As well as this, few 16 to 17-year-olds pay tax, which means that they have a lower stake in society. In addition, 16 to 17-year-olds may be excessively radical and too inexperienced to consider the issues carefully. Another recent movement to extend the franchise is to grant the right to vote to prisoners. One reason for this is that prison is for rehabilitation and getting prisoners back into society, so they should have a say on what type of society they go back into. As well as this, voting is considered a human right, so prisoners should have the right to vote. However, one reason against this is that prisoners have already shown a disregard for the law, so they should not have a say in what the law is. As well as this, voting is seen as a privilege, not a right, which is taken away when they are in prison. In addition, prisoners have not paid their debt to society for committing their crimes, so they do not deserve the right to vote. A pressure group is a membership-based organization that aims to influence lawmaking but does not seek political power for themselves. If a pressure group were to seek political power, they would become a political party. There are 4 types of pressure groups, including causal, sectional, insider, and outsider. A causal group, also called a promotional group, seeks to promote a specific cause and seek to advance that cause by raising awareness and influencing public opinion. A sectional group represents a section of a community or society, typically individuals with the same profession, and seek to advance the interests of that section by influencing public policy. Pressure groups are typically one or the other, either causal or sectional, but it is possible for a pressure group to be both, which depends on what they are trying to promote. An insider pressure group is, or is likely to be, consulted by the government about their cause. An outsider pressure group is not, or is very unlikely to be, consulted by the government about their cause. Because of the differing levels of input insider and outsider pressure groups have with the government and policy making, insider pressure groups will have more influence over the government's decisions than outsider pressure groups will, and therefore will be more likely to bring about changes for their cause. In order to promote their cause, pressure groups will have to use at least one of the 7 methods in an attempt to influence public opinion and policy to bring about change. These methods include Lobbying of financial grants to political parties, a personal support from members of parliament, media campaigns, a direct action, illegal action, and legal proceedings. Lobbying is where a body seeks influence on a political figure. Pressure groups use lobbying to state their views directly to policymakers and respond to any of their queries or concerns. Financial grants to political parties are where a body gives a political party an amount of money in hope they are viewed more favorably. Pressure groups give financial grants to political parties to get their support on their interests and to influence the policies that are brought about. Personal support from members of parliament is when a member of parliament supports a body or cause in any way. Pressure groups want personal support from members of parliament as they have better representation in parliament and will be better able to influence policy and legislative decisions. Media campaigns are a planned series of newspaper articles, television interviews, or social media posts that are intended to meet a specific aim. Pressure groups use media campaigns to make the public more aware of their cause and influence government and policymakers. Direct action is any method of drawing attention from the media, public, and congressmen to try and further their cause. Pressure groups take direct action to bring more attention to their cause and out it in a positive light. Illegal action is any method of drawing attention from the media, public, or congressmen in a way that breaks the law. Pressure groups typically take illegal action to attract significant attention, possibly because their legal action has been ineffective. They may also take illegal action as a way of demonstrating their commitment to their cause. Judicial review is where a judge reviews the lawfulness of a public body's decision or action. A legal proceeding is where a party argues in favor of their claims and the decision is made by a judge, jury, or other trier on the factual or legal issues. Pressure groups may use judicial reviews and legal proceedings to challenge the decisions of public authorities if they believe that these decisions are unlawful, irrational, or unfair. By doing this, pressure groups can hold public authorities accountable and ensure that they comply with their legal obligations. There are 5 factors that can affect pressure groups and the influence that they have over the government and the cause that they promote. These are the size of their membership, or the finance available, the strategic position of the group, or the mood of the public and the attitude of the government. The size of a pressure group's membership can lead to them having more influence, as they will be able to put more pressure on decision makers if they have more supporters. The finance available to a pressure group can lead to them having more influence, as they will be able to pay for campaigns, lobbyists, sponsorships for political parties, and more favorable publicity to make their voices heard. The strategic position of a pressure group can lead to them having more influence, as a group that is more important to the economy or is a key service can put more pressure on the government. Public mood can lead to the pressure group having more influence, as public sentiment and a strong campaign can bring the issue to the attention of decision makers, and politicians are more likely to support a popular cause. The attitude of the government can lead to a pressure group having more influence, as they are more likely to get the outcome that they want if the government is sympathetic to and agree with the group's cause and position. Just Stop Oil is an outsider causal pressure group that are focused on addressing human-caused climate change. Just Stop Oil's methods of gaining attention and influence include civil resistance, non-violent direct action, traffic obstruction, and vandalism. The size of Just Stop Oil's membership size is unknown, but they describe themselves as a rapidly growing movement that aims to mobilize 3,000 people. Both the public and the government agree with Just Stop Oil's climate concerns, but the government's actions do not fully align with their demands. While Just Stop Oil has raised awareness of the issues of climate change, they have been unable to influence the government to implement policies on climate change, which is shown by the government's continued support of fossil fuel exploration. The British Medical Association is an insider, sectional pressure group that represents doctors and medical students. The British Medical Association's methods of gaining attention and influence include lobbying, campaigning, legal action, engaging in open debate, and participating in meetings. The size of the British Medical Association's membership is large, with 190,366 members. The British Medical Association represents doctors and medical students, which is a key service for the country. Both the public and the government agree with the British Medical Association, with the public showing their support for doctors and the government agreeing to make changes for them. The British Medical Association has influenced healthcare policies and practices, with the government agreeing to make improvements to the pay structure for consultant doctors and agreeing to make reforms for specialist doctors. Other organizations, besides pressure groups, can influence the political and legal decision-making process. They may use the same methods as pressure groups, but will act slightly differently. A think tank is a group of experts that are brought together to focus on a certain topic. They have influence over the government and parliament as they develop policy ideas the government and political parties use, which gives them some influence over what these policies are. However, they are normally directed on what they need to work on and do not have free rein over the policies that they develop, which reduces the influence that they have. An example of a think tank is the Institute for Public Policy Research, which conducts research and analysis on the policies the government introduces. Lobbyists are companies that get paid to gain access to government for their clients, which is usually done by employing ex-politicians who know how to access decision makers. Lobbyists often have a direct link with decision makers who they may be able to convince to join their cause and have some influence over, which will give them some influence over the decisions that are being made. However, because government decisions often require multiple people to make the decision, lobbyists will have low influence over the government and the policies that they introduce if their influence is limited to one person. An example of a lobbyist company is the Confederation of British Industry, which has influenced fiscal and monetary policies using its quarterly forecasts and sectoral surveys. Large companies may seek to lobby the government to encourage them to legislate or not legislate in certain areas. The influence of a corporation depends on the number of people that they employ, the finance that they have available to them, the strategic position of the company, and whether the public and the government agree with their interests. With a larger number of employees and an important strategic position, larger companies can act similar to a pressure group and gain some influence over the policies that the government introduces. An example of a large company that has influenced government policies is British Gas, which plays a role in energy policies, renewable energy adoption, and environmental regulations. Civil rights are rights and freedoms protected by the government, with the state having to protect these rights and ensure people can carry them out freely and equally. Civil liberties are rights and freedoms that protect people from arbitrary treatment from the state or government. Human rights combine civil rights and civil liberties and apply to all people and cannot be shortened or removed. Traditionally, UK people had the right to do what they wanted, unless it was illegal. These are called residual or negative right. Judges would decide the traditional or normal way to settle disputes, which would establish common law. There have been many acts that have been passed that have developed the rights of UK people. The Magna Carta 1215 introduced trial by jury and limited the monarch's power so that the monarch could only impose tax with the consent of the people. The European Convention of Human Rights 1950 obligated the government to give UK people certain human rights and prevented the government from taking these away. The Race Relations Act 1965 outlawed discrimination based on race or ethnicity. The Equal Pay Act 1970 made it law that men and women have to be paid the same for the same job. The Human Rights Act 1998 made the European Convention of Human Rights into UK law, which established a range of rights that replaces statutes and common law. The Freedom of Information Act 2000 allowed people to see what information public bodies had on them and to see government spending in information. The Disabilities and Discrimination Act 2005 made it unlawful for employers to treat disabled individuals less favorably because of their disability without justification. The Equality Act 2010 outlawed discrimination against people with the following characteristics: gender reassignment, age, race, pregnancy and maternity, marriage and civil partnership, religion or beliefs, sex, sexual orientation, or disability. The Marriage Act 2013 made same-sex marriage legal. The Marriage and Civil Partnership Act 2023 raised the minimum age for marriage from 16 to 18. All citizens have formal equality, which is established through judicial precedent, although it is debated to what extent these are protected, as Parliament is sovereign and cannot bind its successors. This means that the current Parliament cannot pass a law that a future Parliament is unable to amend or replace. Another limit on the extent human rights is protected is that there are instances where Parliament can ignore the European Convention of Human Rights and the Human Rights Act, and rights can be suspended by the government under certain circumstances. Human rights are protected to a greater extent as the UK has a strong common law tradition and is subject to the European Convention of Human Rights. As well as this, the judiciary has a reputation for being independent and upholding the rule of law, even against the government and Parliament's wishes. However, Human rights are protected to a lesser extent as common law can be vague and disputed and can be set aside by parliamentary statutes. As well as this, Parliament remains sovereign and can ignore the European Convention of Human Rights and can repeal the Human Rights Act. In addition, there is pressure on the government to reduce the rights of individuals in the interest of national security as a result of international terrorism. It is argued whether the collective rights of society are more important than the rights of individuals, with there being some collective rights that conflict with individual rights. The individual right to freedom of expression conflicts with the collective rights of religious groups to not have their beliefs satirized or questioned. The individual right to privacy conflicts with the collective right of the community to be protected from terrorism by security services that may listen to private communications. The individual right to freedom of the press conflicts with the collective right of public figures to keep their private lives private. The individual right to demonstrate in public places and therefore cause a disruption conflicts with the collective right of the community to their freedom of movement. The individual right to strike in pursuit of pay and employment rights conflicts with the collective right of the community to expect good service from public servants who are paid from taxation. Civil liberties groups are similar to pressure groups but work with think tanks and lobbyists. There are several of these that seek to challenge and defend the rights in the UK, which the Human Rights Act has made it easier for them to do. An example of a civil liberties group is Liberty, who challenges injustice and defends freedom. Liberty has taken a High Court challenge against the Investigatory Powers Act to prevent extensive surveillance powers to the authorities. As well as this, Liberty has also campaigned against hostile environment policies and advocated against indefinite immigration detention to ensure immigrants are treated fairly and ensure their human rights are protected. Another example of a civil liberties group is the Electronic Frontier Foundation, who focuses on digital civil liberties. The Electronic Frontier Foundation, along with other groups, has opposed the UK Online Safety Act, which would have allowed online platforms to search through users' photos, files, and messages for illegal content. Thank you for watching this video on democracy and participation. I'll see you in the next lesson.